So do you believe in UFOs? You believe that
absolutely. I've seen 3.
You've seen 3?
I have, yes.
And how close were they to you?
Well, one was 100,000 feet. It was going about 20,000 miles an hour. There were 2 of them. My wife saw it with 2 other witnesses. Because the Concorde makes a left over Martha's Vineyard at about 50,000 feet, so I could gauge the altitude. 100,000 at night, 20,000. They were as if 2 discs, like just flying in tandem and in controlled flight. And it wasn't a meteoric bolide, wasn't a helicopter, wasn't Venus, wasn't the moon, and I had 3 other people with me. And they all believe today that we saw something that was that defied really earthbound engineering.
It's, you know, people are laughing when you describe this because it's coming from you, but you're serious, right?
I am.
Lee, after interviewing so many witnesses tied into this field, what are you coming away with? What's your gut telling you?
Well, my gut tells me, even before I saw this triangular-shaped object in 1975, which was amazing.
Yeah.
Even before that, I was believing the accounts of people. I used to read when I was a kid, George. I was reading books by Major Donald Kehoe. You know,
sure, the Nightcap Head.
Nightcap Head, and he was, talk about being the first whistleblower. He was out there talking about and writing about how pilots, commercial pilots, military pilots, were chasing these things. We're seeing them. Some of them were being shot down because they were shooting at UFOs, and the UFOs shot back.
It was an amazing experience for both of us. We were in near Augusta, Maine, at a cottage that my father-in-law rented in the summertime, and it was one of those, you know, kind of between 8 and 9 p.m. kind of dusk periods in the summer, and we were looking to the pretty much, I guess it was the southwestern sky, and we saw it was very distant, and it was a bright light associated with it, and we saw it, in a hover state, and kind of it caught my eye, and I'm a pilot, so I'm always looking at stuff that's flying and in the air anyway, and as we were looking at it, it did a dogleg and took off at an impossible rate of speed.
Tell me about the time you once saw a UFO.
Well, I was the district governor of 56 Lions Clubs in southwest Georgia, and I had to visit all the Lions Clubs and make a speech. And I was outside a school lunchroom one night right before sundown. It was getting dark, and we were getting ready to eat supper. And I and about 25 men were standing around, and all of a sudden in the western sky we saw a strange light coming toward us, a round light, and it got closer and closer, and right above the pine trees it stopped, and then it began to change colors from blue to red to white, and then it stayed there for a while. We were all aghast, we didn't know what it was, and then it just disappeared into the west. That was the end of it.
It was after midnight, and we're walking north along the shoreline of Cocoa Beach, and towards actually that location, Cape Canaveral, is off to the north, and you can see it just kind of jutting out in like a lip into the Atlantic. You can see the lighthouse and the gantries, the beacons, and all this. And suddenly, you know, there's this thing that emerges from the night sky off to the east, and it's big or close or probably both, and it's got 3 small lights, red lights that don't move or oscillate, and it's darker than the rest of the sky. It takes up space, and you can't see the clouds or the stars where this thing is moving. And I couldn't tell you it was a triangle other than it had 3 lights that were arrayed in a triangle pattern. But we heard, or I heard anyway, what sounded like the hum of a tuning fork on glass, and it moved parallel to the shoreline. It was like it had been watching us, and I got the feeling that this thing, and it's going to sound odd, but that it was almost organic.
Right.
It was one of those things that appeared alive, and anyway, my buddy Steve took off for it, and you know, I told Terry, my girlfriend at the time, I told her to look, and she saw it, and I tried to run after Steve because he's running after it as it's moving up ahead of us, And Terry's going, no, no. She's grabbing my arm, and I'm shaking her off because I want to see this thing. And I guess the duration of it was about maybe no more than 10 seconds. And it just sort of tilted and sort of dissipated, dissolved back into the night sky.
When I got here, there were people milling around, just enjoying the park. And I was here for probably 5 or 10 minutes, and somebody said, look at that, and out to the northwest, this great big massive craft, probably around 3,000 or 4,000 feet, took out a whole chunk of the sky, and you could see other aircraft in the distance, but airplanes looked like little toothpicks compared to the size of this craft. And it came right at us, made not a sound, and just moved almost sort of gently and smoothly, not that fast. It just glided over Squaw Peak. And we had a magnificent view of it silhouetted.
Governor Symington observes the object for nearly a minute before it speeds away across the valley.
It just all of a sudden disappeared. You know, I served in the U.S. Air Force, and I've been flying all my adult life. And I've never seen anything like that before. It obviously had unbelievable aeronautical capabilities, something way beyond anything we have in our inventory, that's for sure.
In very early 90s, and we watched an object, an egg-shaped object, for quite some time that was hovering. A wingless craft. And it's funny, actually, because at the time I'd never thought of UFO. As a matter of fact, I had a very good friend of the family's who's a pilot, and he talked about the sighting that he had, and I just quickly dismissed it and never asked him another question. I couldn't have cared less about UFOs. And when I had my sighting with a very dear friend of mine, Lisa Reinhardt, we talked about it that night, and she said, "What the bleep is that?" And I said, "I don't know." I was 19. I don't know. But whatever it is, it knows we're looking at it. She said, "I feel the same thing."
I'm flying out of Stansted Airport this morning, and I live in the Midlands, so I was driving east, cross-country, and I was probably, I think it's about 15, 20 miles from Stansted Airport. I was out in the countryside, 4:15 in the morning, and I saw this big, bright light in the sky, and what looked like an aircraft coming towards, or descending towards the road which I was driving. And as it got closer, it then banked to the left, what was to my right, and then as it banked to the left and went across the countryside, I could see underneath, and it wasn't an aeroplane, and it wasn't a helicopter, and it was much bigger than a helicopter, probably the size of an aircraft, but it was certainly of a kind of, I dread saying this, disc-shaped, because it had several lights flashing all around it, and underneath there were at least two large panel lights, soft white lights underneath, and then it just sat or just circled a certain area above the field for a few moments. I was so gobsmacked, I was trying to negotiate the road, which was a small country lane, and then eventually I dropped down and lost sight of it. But certainly for 2 or 3 minutes, I saw what I think was not a normal aircraft. It was a big kind of disc, sort of round-shaped craft, and it didn't move. Once it had gone over the field, it was kind of staying in the same area, because I watched it as I could. I watched it for 2 or 3 minutes before I eventually lost sight of it.
Statistically, it's a certainty there are hugely advanced civilizations, intelligences, life forms out there. I believe they're so advanced that they're even doing interstellar travel. I believe it's possible they came here. Twice I saw what I call my eel, which I don't know the size of it because I don't know how far away it was, but it was like a rubber piece of hose which had internal motions in it. Maybe it's 8 feet, maybe it's 10, I'm not sure. When you can't tell how far away, you can't get the size, so I'm missing both of those things, size and how far away. But there's no question it had internal motion.